This is part 2 of a series called Spiritual Legacy. Spiritual Legacy. And spiritual legacy is what lives on in others because of the life you live with God. It's what lives on in others because of the life you live with God. And this is part 2. So part 1, what did we talk about? We said spiritual legacy is more than what you leave behind. It's who, and especially we were asking this question. We need to come to terms with our spiritual inheritance. So last week we were asking not what do you want to pass on, but what was passed on to you? What did you receive? What's your spiritual inheritance that you received from your mother and from your father, from your church of origin, from your childhood? So what are you bringing into this when it comes to your spiritual legacy? That's a really good place to start. You remember this quote, any pain or tension that we do not transform, we will transmit. In the face of jealousy, anger, bitterness, hatred, we must become like water purifiers. Do you all remember our experiment last week? I had a cup of water, and I had a cup of gravel and dirt from the parking lot, and I mixed those two together, and we put them in a filter, and then Marcus drank it. And is he here today? This is concerning. All right. We checked on him midweek, and he was fine. There was no vomiting from what we put in his water. So the illustration still holds, I think. So he says, it's like a water purifier, holding back the poisons and the toxins and giving back just the pure water, rather than being like electrical cords that simply pass on the energy that flows through them. So you received a lot of good stuff from your family. You received life and flourishing. You received the water that helps you go. But you also received a lot of hidden things. And quite obviously, there's some big stuff there too that you know about. You see the rocks, you see the gravel, but it's the hidden things. You'll see the story in the Memphis papers this week about the lead and the water at Memphis schools. It's like, this isn't good. They need some Brita, all right? But so do you, okay? This is what we talked about last week. We all need a little Brita in our life to filter what we were receiving in hidden ways and in big ways. So this is our text from last week. Tear down your father's altar to Baal and cut down the Asherah pole beside it, and then build a proper kind of altar to the Lord your God on the top of this height, using the wood of the Asherah pole that you cut down. Offer the second bull as a burnt. So this was the instructions to Gideon. And it's like, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go confront your father's sin, and then I want you to use the remnants to build a better spiritual legacy. And so this is our starting point. It's not our end point, and so I'm going to be moving forward in this series, but I know that there's actually a lot of work that you probably still need to follow up on from week 1. And so I just want to encourage you, take the next step of obedience from what God was doing. I got so much feedback from last week. I was debriefing with Kevin, and I was like, this is probably like the sermon for somebody in their 20s. Because you start just realizing all the stuff that's there, but you haven't yet dealt with it. So this is the time to deal with it, whatever part of that story that you're in. I was reminded of one of my favorite authors. He's a pastor named Steve Cuss. He says, while a family tree or genogram may reveal some significant challenge from your upbringing, it's not about blame or about being a victim. It's about understanding what you're holding and what is holding you. As Seth Godin wrote, it's not your fault, but it might be your responsibility. So in the words of Forrest Frank, when life gives you lemons, my Jesus, he'd be making lemonade, all right? So that was special for Jamie McKinley. She asked me to do that. So we both had lemonade on loop in our homes, and she's like, can you quote that on Sunday? I was like, I'll find a way. All right. In other words, this is Tremaine McKinley's summary of my lesson. Progressive can't keep you from becoming like your parents, but they can bundle your home and your auto. So, all right, you've got some stuff. This is part 1 of your spiritual legacy, right? This is the legacy that you inherited. But thanks be to God, because of Jesus Christ, you get to inherit a better name and a better inheritance and a better family than anything your mom or dad could pass on. So this is part 2, intentional parenting. And now half the room isn't parents, and sure you're like, really? I've got to endure however long the sermon is, too long, to listen to a sermon on parenting. So let me just make a case for a couple of reasons why this might be for you. Number one, Number one, we're all in this together, okay? 3 reasons. Annie, Fletcher, and Evie. Those are my 3 reasons why I want you to care about this, even if you don't have kids. In other words, those are my kids, by the way. If you're visiting, you're like, who are these people? So we're all part of this spiritual family together, and it takes a community to raise a Christian. And so we actually need one another in this. You know this, in your story, when you were coming up in the faith or in the church, it wasn't just your parents that you connected to. The reason Mark and Anna and Harrison and Zoe are in this room with our teenagers today is because there was a 20-something in their life that they looked up to and thought, I want to be like them when I'm in my 20s. They're not there just because of their parents. They're there because of someone who was without a child who invested in their life. Actually, next week, Kevin's going to tackle what we're calling spiritual parenting. And spiritual parenting next week is going to be all about how do you kind of pass on a spiritual legacy if you don't have physical lineage or physical children. And you actually see that this is the main theme in the way of Jesus, in the way of Paul, in the way of the church. And so we all have a part to pass on. And so it takes a community to raise a Christian. But also know that many of you, even if you don't have kids today, you very likely will at some point have either spiritual or physical children. And so I think there's something for you. So at whatever stage you're at, you may be an empty nester, you may be transitioning, you may be becoming an empty nester. There's a phase of parenting that I would love for you to kind of put on and listen to today. If you've got like an adolescent, if you've got somebody in this room, I want you to listen with that lens in mind. If you've got like a little baby, if you've got one on the way, I want you to listen with kind of the whole story in mind. If you've got a dating partner, if you're engaged, I would love for you to just start having these conversations. Because, and I'm going to share this principle many times today, it's the law of the harvest. And it's like there's some things you can cram for. Your spiritual legacy isn't one of those. You have to plant the seeds. And you may not be in the seed planting phase of your life, but you can till the soil. And so I think wherever you are, kind of in your journey and walk with God, you can till the soil for your spiritual legacy. You can plant the seeds for your spiritual legacy, or you can start tending that harvest. And so whatever kind of place you're in that, I'd love for you to tune in and not just tune out for the next however long this teaching is. So the question here is, what is the spiritual legacy you want to leave behind? Last week we dealt with what was the spiritual legacy you're receiving, but what is the spiritual legacy that you actually want to leave behind? This is a question all of us need to answer. You need to answer it because of your physical family, but you also need to answer it because of your spiritual family. More on that next week. But here's the tension, it seems to me, that today's default doesn't make disciples. So you can picture this, right? You think, well, my parents were fine, and look at me, I turned out fine. My parents weren't exceptional, my parents weren't highly intentional, my parents just kind of, they just did life, and by the grace of God, here I am. But I want you to know, and I think you already know this, the world that we're raising our kids in is not the world that you were raised in. It is, statistically speaking, harder to be a lifelong disciple today than it was 30 years ago. Today's default doesn't make disciples. Remember, I've shared these stats so many times with us. Right now, researchers say that 66% of Christian teens in the church, will drop out by the time they're 25 years old. So it's just like, as soon as they graduate, gone for 2/3 of them. They say even among the most active church-going teens, 50% of the most active church-going teens will be gone by the time they're 25 years old. Today's default doesn't make disciples, at least not lifelong disciples. This is a major tension because what raised you won't raise them. There's pressures from our digital technology, from the culture around us, that are pushing like never before, that we have not seen in Exodus from the church like this in the history of Christianity. What's happening in the U.S. church is that in the last 30 years, 30 million people have stepped away from the church. People who were in the church are no longer in the church. Today's default doesn't make disciples, which means we have to move from default into intentional, from accidental into intentional. So lifelong faith formation, if you care about this for your kids or for your spiritual legacy, lifelong faith formation is intentional, it's not accidental. Because today's default, the culture is pressing in like never before, which means the culture is not helping you. It's actively working against lifelong discipleship to Jesus. If you just kind of let that go and do not resist it, the current is moving very strongly like never before. But it's not only the culture, big, whatever that is, it's also our institutions. Our institutions, it's not that they're working against you, but it's that they can't carry this for you. Today's default doesn't make disciples, and if you default to your schools or even to your church, you can be a part of a great school, you can be a part of a Christian school, you can be a part of a great church, but the task of spiritual legacy is carried primarily by parents, not by teachers, not by administrators, and not even by youth ministers if we had one. We just got volunteers. It's not carried by church staff. It's carried by families. So you've heard me make this case over and over and over. This is just kind of a core part of our church. We have so many kids, and this is what we're after. We're after what I'm calling today intentional parenting. And I'm going to make 4 observations about the heart of parenting, and we're going to be in Deuteronomy chapter 6. Deuteronomy chapter 6. Open that up on your Bible or your screen. This is one of the most, if not the most, kind of foundations for intentional parenting in all of the scriptures. And we're just going to kind of camp out here, look at a few special phrases. And then I'm going to mostly make observations about my own approach to parenting. And this isn't because I've got it figured out, but it is because I am a highly determined, intentional father. If you can help me, I've got the determination to make this go. Now, I don't have the skills, I don't have the history, I don't have the inheritance. I'm still trying to deal with the stuff that I've inherited, but I have determination. And so I hope I can talk to some people today who have some determination. Because if you can combine a community of mercy with a high level of determination, I think that can equal an intentional level of parenting that produces a spiritual legacy that we're after. Now, by the grace of God, by the mercy of God, we're all hanging on that. But I'm not perfect, and notice it's not about perfect parenting, this is about intentional parenting. So when I make observations, I'm not saying that I'm the exemplar. I'm just trying to say, you can do this. You can do this in your own way. And if at all some of my stories help resonate, then thanks be to God. And if they don't, just let them go and come up with something better. I would love for you to tell me about your better ideas. Maybe I'll take on some of yours too. I do that all the time. So one more note on me as I share stories about my parenting. It's just, again, I reserve the right to get smarter as I go along. So this is where Kelsey and I are at today. And in 6 months, we're not going to be there. We're going to be, Lord willing, improving and refining. So this is kind of a snapshot in a moment in time. All right, intentional parenting. 4 observations about the heart of parenting. Number 1, I would love for you to take notes if you're a parent. On the back of that bulletin, there's a spot to do this. Number 1, intentional parenting has the end in mind. Intentional parenting has the end in mind. This is Deuteronomy chapter 6. He says, "These are the commands, the decrees, laws the Lord your God directed me to teach you to observe in the land that you're crossing in the Jordan to possess, so that you see it, your children and their children after them may fear the Lord your God as long as you live, by keeping all his decrees and commands that I give you, and so that you may enjoy long life." So this is the second giving of the law. That's literally what Deuteronomy means. It's second law. And what this is they get the law when they go into the wilderness, and then they wander around for 40 years. And this is at the end of 40 years, Moses is saying, I'm giving the law a second time to the generation that's still alive, who's going to the promised land. And the purpose of God giving the law is to have a generational handoff from one generation to the next to the next. It's for you, it's for your children, it's for your children after you for this purpose, so that you can fear the Lord and so that you can enjoy a good life. I want you to experience the good life. Here's how to do it. You fear the Lord. All right, so Hear, Israel. Remember, Israel, they don't have a word for obey. The word hear, it's listen. It's listen and obey. Hear, Israel, and be careful to obey so that that's that same idea, to do it, to listen to it, so that it may go well with you, so that you may increase greatly in the land flowing with milk and honey, just as the Lord, the God of your ancestors, promised you. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Now, this is really important. Whenever you think of God, there's a lot of gods out there, and God can just kind of generically refer to a deity, but a deity is not God. God is Yahweh, the God of Israel. God is a Father and a Son and a Holy Spirit. God isn't a concept. God is three persons in one being. God is integrity. God is unity. God is the foundation. God is one. He is Yahweh. And so, love the Lord, Yahweh, your God, with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. Love, this concept, the commentary, he calls it total allegiance. With all your heart. This word heart is important. He says, the heart in Hebrew, Christopher Wright, was not so much the seat of emotions and feelings as it is in English metaphors, as the seat of intellect, will, and do you see this word? Intention. Your heart is where you set your intention. It's not just where you feel things. That was your guts in the biblical metaphor. But your heart is where you will something. It's where you want something. It's where you intend something. And so you think in your heart, your heart shapes your character, your choices, your decisions. It's the center of the human being as a moral agent. And so love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. You know, your soul isn't that part of you that flies off. That's not how the Hebrew Bible uses the word soul. The word soul is like your identity, your self, your you-ness. So with all your intention, with all your identity, and with all your strength, with all your, some translations say, with all your resources, or with all your money, with all your muchness, like with everything you've got. One commentary says, just to excess, as much as you can. And so he says, to love God then with all your heart and with all your soul means with your whole self, including your rationality, your mental capacity, your moral choices and will, your inner feelings and desires, and the deepest roots of your life. That's why when Jesus quotes this command, he adds a word to it. He says you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. Because he's taking in this Hebrew idea. He understands that the mind and the intent is always built into what these words mean in Hebrew. In other words, it's a total allegiance. So I just want to connect this. These commands that I give you today are to be on your hearts. On your hearts. I was listening to John Ortberg's new book, Steps. And he says, he tells the story of the rabbis. The rabbis ask, why is the law on your heart, not in your heart? He says, you put the law on your heart so that when you go through life and your heart breaks, it actually lets the law kind of soak in. So all the heartbreaking kind of things that we go through allow the Word of God to seep in. So these commands, they're to be on your heart. Remember, on your will, on your intention. But look at this. This is the big command. Love God with your heart, soul, mind, strength. And then the next verse, impress these on your children. It's on your heart so that it can be on your children. On your heart so that it can be on your children. And what I'm calling this is just intentional parenting. And what I mean is this first point, is intentional parenting has the end in mind. Let me just get a little more practical. What I mean when I say the end in mind is that I just kind of encourage you, challenge you, parents. You people who might be parents, you're preparing for parent, wherever it is in this chapter of your life, get a vision for what God has for you. When I say vision, I just mean a picture. Like, what is the beautiful picture at the end of the story as you're walking with them? Now, Stephen Covey, he calls this the funeral exercise. Now, you know the funeral exercise. It's like, imagine that you're going to a funeral, and then you look in the casket, and it's you, and then you're witnessing what is said about you, and you're hearing. And so, like, what do you want said about you? That's Covey's funeral exercise, so let me scratch that and say, the day your child leaves home exercise is not as catchy, but I think this, just can you get a vision for what this is? The day your child leaves home exercise. It's like, some of you are like really close to that. I'm picking up on some of that. It's like, what is it? What are you after? What does it look like? What have you passed on? What's the legacy that's carried? Let me ask it like this. What do you want them to know? What do you want them to be, to do, to have, to experience? Like, you've got whatever time you've got. At the end of that time, and God willing, there'll be many more times after that to get a vision for, but can you start here with getting a vision for what you want them to know, be, do, have, and experience? And when I say get a vision, I mean talk about it. Like, picture it. Pray it. Ask the Lord, seek Him. Try to just figure out what is God's destiny for this. And here, I think it's a pretty good baseline. Remember 12-year-old Jesus? He wanders around the temple for 3 days. His mom comes back, and she's upset with him. What do you mean? How come you would do this to your father and I? And then she ponders these things in her heart, but it gives this summary statement at the end of Luke 2, and it says that Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and favor with God and man. And I think this is just a pretty good paradigm for the vision that you want at the end when your child leaves home, right? This is what you want to see. You want them to grow like Jesus. Wisdom, stature, favor with God, and favor with man. For me and Kelsey, we've been setting a bunch of goals as we're looking into this new school year. We homeschool our kids. We get to craft a lot of their schedules. And so this is the grid that we use to think about our daily schedule, our weekly schedule, our monthly schedule, our quarterly schedule, and our annual schedule. And if you're like, that's a lot, it's like, you do the same thing, okay? Like, you have your own calendar. Somebody else gave it to you, sure. But I don't think today's default is going to make disciples. And so I'm encouraging you to take on an intentional level of parenting. And this is a pretty basic grid to use. Wisdom, stature, favor with God, and favor with man. What I mean by wisdom is your mental and educational goals for your child. Stature, I mean your physical and emotional. Favor with God, I mean your spiritual. And favor with man, I mean your relational. And here's what can happen. You can get to the end of your story, and whichever one of those has felt most urgent every day, that's the one you went with. Or you just kind of sit back and you relax and you let the default go, and then someone will give you their values. Get a vision, and then number 2 under this, discern your values. Moses is saying, like, these are the commandments. These are what I want you to talk about and to repeat, to impress, to repeat over and over again. These commandments that I give you, impress them. This word impress, it's repeat over and over. It's say it again, do it again, do it again. It's like, you can hear a coach almost saying, like, again. That's the word impress. This is what the call of Moses is. I was reading the book called Intentional Parenting. It's Sissy Goff, David Thomas. They have a counseling group in Middle Tennessee, and they produce some amazing resources for parenting. And in this book, Intentional Parenting, David Thomas, he relays a story of just that day whenever his child was kind of first handed to him in the hospital. And I don't know if you've been there, but like, this isn't a day that you prepare for. You prepare more for your driver's license than you do for the day that you get a child. And then they put that child in your car, and then they're like, now keep it alive. And it's like, I don't know how. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm responsible for every part of this person's formation, and I didn't go through a class, and there was no coach. And so he felt this kind of overwhelming weight of what was on him, and he says, but as he and his wife started talking, he says, what came out of these conversations was a vision for our family. And notice, it doesn't come before this moment, really. It's like it comes at you fast. And so what came next were some deliberate decisions about living out that vision. This requires us being proactive more than being reactive. He says a good way to jumpstart this process is by writing a family mission statement. And you may think that sounds too formal or too corporate. That's fine. Do it in your own way. But he says put into words what you want to be about as a family. Define your core values and develop some family goals from that place. Now, here's what happens if you don't define your core values. Your kids are going to try to pick them up, and they're going to try to please you, and they'll be trying to tend to what you're trying to live into, but it's so much easier for them and for you if you can just articulate what they are and step into them. Here's where my family's at today. Our family mission statement right now is we want to produce lifelong faith, and that's marked by love God, love others, and live brave. We have values associated with each part of this. By love God, we mean grace, wisdom, and discipline. By love others, we mean service, honor, and hospitality. And by live brave, we mean kingdom, courage, and risk. I printed this off. I was running it by my kids, and I was like, all right, which of these is like new or you don't recognize? They're like, this sounds like us. I was like, what I'm doing here is like, I don't want you to think that the measure, what we're after, like what we value, what's important to us is somehow like that you're pretty, or that you have cool clothes, or that you're wealthy, or that you are achieving or getting good grades, or it's like, that's not what we care about. This is what we care about. And the beautiful thing is Annie's like, well, I don't hear this. She was kind of working through our phrase on discipline. She's like, I haven't heard this one a lot. She was working through our phrase on wisdom. I was like, all right, your mom and I have some work to do. We need to kind of up our game on some of the gaps right here. But love God, love others, live brave. This is what we want our kids to step into today. Again, in a year's time, we reserve the right to get smarter as we go along. So first, intentional parenting means having the end in mind, getting a picture of what that looks like and the values to get there. Number two, intentional parenting has your calendar in mind. Intentional parenting has your calendar in mind. These commandments that I give you, I want to impress them on your children. Repeat it. Do it twice. Repeating them constantly, one commentary says. Next verse. Talk about them. Talk about them. When? When you sit at home, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, when you get up, you see the daily rhythm. Somehow, what's important to you has to show up in the day itself. Tie them as symbols on your hands. Bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates. Block in his commentary, he says, the purpose of all these elements was to mark those who claimed Yahweh as their covenant Lord and committed themselves to loving him wholeheartedly. So tie them, bind them, write them. Can you imagine if you saw a Christian who was like tying, binding, writing like some Orthodox Jews are today? You would look at a Christian who did stuff like this and you would be like, extreme much? All right. But then you would look at somebody who was an Alabama fan and be like, roll tide, all right? Or go Vols, or like whatever it is. Guys, what I'm saying is like we literally do this, but we do not do it with Yahweh your God. And your kids are noticing. And so if you adorn your house as a spectacle to Disney, or in the case of my home, to basketball, or to Alabama or Tennessee or to Dallas Cowboys or whatever it is, your kids are going to notice. John Tyson, he says, like, make your home a theme park for your values. And the truth is, you will. That just will naturally happen. But there is a way to fake it till you make it. And so adorn your home into the values that you want, even if you don't quite feel them yet. Sorry, no offense to the Alabama fans in the room. I didn't hear any roll tide, so I don't think there are any. They cannot help it. All right, there she is. I was like, where's Jess? All right. It's a weird tick. It's like roll tide. You can't not. All right. So what does this look like to have your calendar in mind? I think it looks like creating a values-based calendar. And so like what is your calendar, your days, your weeks, your months, your quarters, your years, and then what are your values? Peter Drucker, he has this concept that I've talked about perhaps here called posteriorities. And so it's like, you know what a priority is, but Drucker coins this term posteriority. He says every posteriority is somebody else's top priority. It's much easier to draw up a nice list of top priorities and then to hedge by trying to do just a little bit of everything else as well. This makes everybody happy. The only drawback is, of course, that nothing whatever gets done. So he's thinking from a business perspective, if you don't know what your priorities are, then you're going to focus on all the wrong things. But what I'm saying is from a parenting, from a spiritual legacy standpoint, if you don't know what your priorities are, or if you let your priorities bleed into things that are lesser important to you, those things are going to take over and dominate. And I think this is just how our calendars work. And so the grid that we use is wisdom, stature, favor with God, and favor with man. And if you can just look at a week in the life of your child, and you can put this grid up next to them, you can kind of realize, well, we're spending a lot of time on this wisdom. We've got 8 hours of educational outcomes, maybe half an hour of some of these physical outcomes, the stature. Where is the thing that is most important to me in the day-to-day calendar of my child? And the truth is, most of the time it's not there. It becomes the posteriority, the thing that's just, I'll get to it when I get to it. All this other stuff crowds it out. And so I think you want a values-based calendar, a calendar that reflects what is actually important to you. That wisdom, stature, favor with God, favor with man, this is, I think, what you want for your child. I think this is probably what you want for you. So there's this principle, this is Annie Dillard in one of her novels. She says, how you spend your days is how you spend your life. How you spend your days is how you spend your life. And you see this, a parent's love is spelled T-I-M-E. So it's got to make it from ideas and paper into your rhythm itself. And if it doesn't, it won't happen. It's the law of the harvest, right? It's Tyson, he talks about just kind of what's at stake here. He says the typical young person is exposed to 3,000 hours of formative content a year, and only 150 hours of explicitly Christian content in that same time. Who do you think is winning that war? And so he says, like, he's got a 12-year-old son at the time. His name is Nate, and he's going to lead Nate into an intentional pathway of formation from 12 to 18, and he's going to launch him into something. He's got big trips and big experiences that he wants to walk with his son through, but he also has a daily rhythm with Bible open, with journal, and he's going to be instructing and walking him in the ways that he wants to pass down. And he says, every time I talk about this, dads will say, that's so intense, that's too much. And he's like, your child is doing 2-a-days at football. Is that more important? He's like, you can make 45 minutes for this every morning. He says, look at what's at stake. If you don't do this, it won't happen. He says, if you just ask him, what does your daily ritual look like? He says, Nate and I met every day before school from 5:45 until about 6:30, depending on what we were going through at the time. And this gave us some solid boundaries from the beginning. This is the boundary. This is his minimum. There is no formation without repetition and consistency. He says, this morning time was the meat and potatoes of the entire journey. We went to the same spot in the house every morning, pulled out whatever book we were working through, grabbed our pens and our journals, and we dug in. If you do nothing else, have a morning ritual with your child. This will change everything. So it's got to move from your values into your calendar. This is what a values-based calendar will end up looking like. And so if a parent's love is spelled T-I-M-E, time, then the time is now when it comes to your calendar. It says Tyson in his work, Raising Resilient Daughters, I've showed you this before. He says, this is how we think time works with our kids. You think you have all the time in the world. He says, but this is actually how your time works. You've got so much of your lifelong time with your child is before they turn 19 years old. And then, God willing, you can have a sustained relationship, but even a sustained relationship in adulthood doesn't have the life-on-life discipling opportunities that you have before they head off to college or to that first job or to whatever it is as they step out of your home. And so the time is now. This is the law of the harvest. And the truth is, you can't cram for the harvest. This is not a test where you can just make it all up at the end. These seeds have to be planted in season in order to be harvested in season. The good news is that you can always plant for the season that you're in. When's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. When's the second best time to plant a tree? Now. It's like you can't cram for the harvest. And so start the seeds today. What do the seeds look like in your current chapter? And intentional parenting keeps the end in mind. Intentional parenting keeps your calendar in mind. And then number 3, intentional parenting has your child in mind. Your child in mind. Impress these on your children. Talk about them. When you sit, when you walk, when you lie down, when you get up. And then a little later in Deuteronomy 6, he says this. He says, in the future, when your son asks you, what's the meaning of the stipulations, the decrees, the laws the Lord our God has commanded you? He's observing something, and he's asking this question. Wright says, like a number of other texts, this passage envisages internal family teaching, in which parents answer children's questions regarding specific events, memorials, rituals, observance. It's like, why are we doing this, Dad? And the child's question then becomes the springboard for explanation and teaching, rather like a catechism. A catechism is just a question from a child that has a response from really kind of solid, healthy doctrine. Block, he calls this a family catechism in Deuteronomy chapter 6. This is the first evidence that we have anywhere of a family catechism. It's a question and an answer. It's a conversational gospel dialogue about what God is doing in our lives. And he says, Moses assumes that when faced with the challenge of competing cultures, children will ask their parents for an explanation of their way of life. Why are we doing this when no one else is? Why are we doing this when it's so hard? Why are we doing this when it's so costly? Dad, why? Why does Granddad do this and you do that? It's like your kids are going to be asking some questions about what's going on. He says, tell him, we were slaves of Pharaoh in Egypt, but the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand. He's telling the story of God. Before our eyes, the Lord sent signs and wonders, great and terrible, on Egypt and on Pharaoh and his whole household. And our story is not the story of Egypt alone. It is the story of the true Passover lamb. The great and terrible things have happened to Jesus Christ, but the Lord has raised him from the dead. But he brought us out of our own bondage through the blood of Jesus Christ. He brought us out to bring us in and to give us the land that he promised on oath to our ancestors. The Lord commanded us. Now, notice, it takes a while before he finally says, because God told us to. Mostly he's just like, because God is so awesome and because God saved us. Yeah, he also told us to. But even that is so that you could flourish, so that you could always prosper and be kept alive, as is the case today. And if we are careful to obey all this law before the Lord our God as he commanded us, that will be our righteousness. Our righteousness as a family, look at this commentary, it's so good. He says, this is, in short, a righteousness that presumes the experience of redemption, not a righteousness that presumes to achieve redemption. He says, God saved us. And this is the cloak that we get to wear because we are God's children. Look at it. Look how amazing this garment is that God has given us to wear. This is our righteousness. It's a righteousness we didn't achieve. It's a righteousness we received because God is so good to us. This is his answer to that question of why. And so, let me get more practical. Intentional parenting has your child in mind. And so here's a couple of ways that I think this shows up for us. I think, number one, this looks like celebrating your child's unique gifts. I'm going to call them gifts because the reality is most of our child's gifts first need to be unwrapped. Like they need to be like dug up out of the mud. Is that fair? Celebrate your child's unique gifts. This is Intentional Parenting, David Thomas. He says, we believe in this strongly in the study of development and temperament. Parenting is a lifelong journey of discovering that brilliant, one-of-a-kind, intentional, creative process of God imprinting on them in the secret place. Do you see that phrase, God imprinting on them? He permanently wrote on their little hearts before we ever laid eyes or hands on them. It's like you're receiving a child formed and fashioned by the Creator Almighty. And so he says we want to engage in a long, slow journey of studying temperament, the unique hardwiring that's imprinted onto the design of our children. We must parent in tandem with that design, not in opposition to it. Our job is to become a student, to seek to understand the work that God began and is faithfully completing in the lives of our children. Our job is to steward that, not change it. I wish he had said squash it. It's to steward that, not squash it. And can I just admit that it is way more natural for me as a dad to squash than it is to steward. I picked up, part of my own inheritance, is that a parent's responsibility is to squash. It is, I think, there was probably about 5 years of my life where I got a spanking every single day. It was just like, Dad's home. I was like, all right, we gotta make up for whatever happened today. Except one day, my dad was given the charge when he got home, hey, this is what your sons have done while you were gone. And so he took us upstairs. And he's like, guys, I'm so tired of spanking you every day. I don't want this. You don't want this. So what if you just start crying loud enough so that your mom can hear it? And of course, this did not work. Because instead of our fake tears were found out immediately. Do you see how someone could pick up that it's easier to squash than it is to steward? It's just like, maybe that's true for you. And so this is something that isn't natural for me as a dad, that my wife is helping me step into, and the Lord, by His grace, is mercifully growing me in. But my job as a dad is not to change my child. It's to see and praise God for the beautiful gift that is my child, and then to unwrap that gift. Now, the trouble is, you have to raise the child you have, not the one you wish you had. And this comes with everything about your child. Their personality, their temperament, the ways they're like you, the ways they're unlike you. And it's like, just physical, emotional, spiritual, it's like, this is the gift God has given you. This is the gift God has given the world. Steward it. But the other challenge of celebrating your child's unique gifts is that their strengths often present as shadows. Their strengths show up as shadows. It's like, I'm so frustrated by your bullheadedness, your stubbornness. I can't imagine where you get it, but it's so frustrating. And it's like, this is actually the thing that God is going to release into His kingdom. And so what would it look like to praise God for the gift and then to beg God for help unwrapping that one? My job as a parent is to release that gift into the kingdom. Not to squash it, not to pin it up, but to release it. This is hard. This is going to test you as a parent. But if you can get to a place of gratitude for the shadows, now you've got something to work with. There's a level of acceptance that the Lord can really use. All right. So celebrate your child's unique gifts. Number 2 here, invest in gospel conversations. Remember that phrase, family catechism. This is our drop-off family catechism. We drive over to Harding or walk over to Harding when we were doing that. We're now homeschooled, so the commute is a little shorter. What makes you so special? Remember, catechism is question and answer. I would just encourage you to come up with your own questions, come up with your own answers. I'm made in the image of God and redeemed in the image of Jesus Christ. Do you know how much I love you? I love you now and forever, no matter what, no matter where you go or what you do, I'll never stop loving you. We say this every night. We say this every morning. We say this, at drop-off, when we wake up, when we lie down, when we walk. It's like, this is hanging over our dinner table in our home. Do you know why? We love because He first loved us. And what's the most important thing to do today? Love God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. So, these are just ours, right? And these are ours for now. They'll change. But what would it look like for you to come up with yours? Just ways of building a family catechism where the kids at a 3-year-old can learn to ask and answer these questions, and they'll do it as fast as they can. In 15 seconds a day, you can form a gospel identity in your child. So, invest in gospel conversations, but mostly what I mean here is to invest in emotional connection. Emotional connection. This is from a big research project by a guy named Christian Smith. He's like the top researcher of young adult faith in the United States, and he's been doing this for about 30 years. He says the most effective parent conversations about religion with children are children-centered rather than parent-centered. In them, children ask questions, and talk more while parents mostly listen. He says parents can be very invested and intentional about religious transmission. This is like what we're after, right? Intentional parenting. But, he says, you can be very intentional, but if they have emotionally distant and critical relationships with their children, their efforts are likely to fail or backfire. Do you see what he says? He puts it like this: the quality of conversations and interactions is more important for influencing children than the particular content that parents try to instill or teach. It doesn't matter what you say unless they know how much, I blew that, man. They don't care how much you say until they know how much you care. Okay, there it is. He says, how parents and their children interact has more influence on the outcomes than the particular substance that parents try to communicate. Dads, listen up. The role of fathers is especially important in forming children religiously. Both parents matter a lot in faith transmission, but the role of fathers appears to be particularly crucial, providing dads with extra influence and responsibility in the matter. And so my question for you dads is it time for a dad date night? I think it is. All right, dad date night was something I started last year because Kelsey asked me a really hard question. I told you the story. We were at a spiritual retreat. We were reflecting on our family together. We had a long drive. We were kind of processing the year and some of our goals. And she asked me, I think, what would it look like for you to be as intentional at home as you are at work? And I realized that part of what this would look like is me trying to sustain an emotional connection with my daughter who was going to Kelsey for everything and not to me. And so part of that rhythm was just dad date night. So Thursday nights is dad date night. I have 3 kids and just one wife. And so everybody gets one a month, basically. And it's not bad. Do you see the cinnamon roll here? Sweet Lala's has some good stuff. Dads, it's not terrible, okay, to go eat cinnamon rolls with your child. Or here's Fletcher's. All right? All right? Fletcher gives a rating at the end of dad date night. So Annie and I, we go to bakeries. Sometimes we go grab pizza. It changes depending on what hour of the day it is. Bakeries typically aren't open very late. Pizza is open. Fletcher, we go grab barbecue. And so we've hit so many barbecue joints in Memphis. And this is a great way to bond and to have an emotional connection with my kids. At the end of it, he gives a rating. He gave Elwood Shack a 7 out of 10. I cannot vouch for this. Elwood Shack is at least a 9. He gave Tops Barbecue an 8. This one shut down like a week later. It's like, I don't think that's right. Here's some of the questions that I try to ask at dad date night. We talk for a while, but then I'm always going to hit these questions. What have you been feeling big? Is there anything you want me to know? How's your walk with the Lord? What do you wish I would do more? What do you wish I would do less? If you could get your child's input into these questions in a safe environment where it's not a one-off, it's not something that happens every 5 years, it's not something that happens every year, it's something that happens every month, they will open up to you. The emotional connection that you can build with your child through small deposits that make it into your calendar. But here's the thing. You have to parent with your calendar in mind. Your calendar will fill up with lesser things than your kids and Sweet Lala's and Elwood Shack. And it will be something that you will lament and regret, not just because of the good food that you could be having, but because of the emotional connection that you could be building. So intentional parenting has your child in mind, but last one, intentional parenting has yourself in mind. I was talking about being a student of your child. And what Thomas says is, he says, being a student of our children really starts with being a student of us. Taking inventory of who we are, knowing the strengths and struggles we bring to parenting. Understanding how our kids experience us, right? Those are those questions like, what would you want me to do more of? What would you want me to do less of? My son wants me to do more of basketball. He wants me to work less. I only see you when you get home late. And I want you around more. You know, for a season before the digital fast, it was, I want you to have less of your phone. And thank God he's kind of eradicated some of those habits from our home. And so it's like, all right, they have the eyes to be able to see into your life in ways that you need. Now, if they're 18 months old, not so much, right? All right, those conversations are short. But what Tyson says, he actually built that rhythm of taking his kid in a car seat to Waffle House so that he already had the rhythm. This wasn't going to be a rhythm that he was going to introduce later or too late. This was a rhythm he was going to start too early. He was going to make sure it showed up in his calendar so that over time it could just build up into something more and better. Now, I don't know how you do Waffle House with a baby. That's more about you as a dad, just getting some time, I think. But maybe giving mom a break or something. But all right, so it's about having yourself in mind. A couple of S's here. I'm going to try to move quick. I'm sorry about the time. What I mean by have yourself in mind is to seek your sanctification. Because here's the truth. The questions that the son is asking, he asks because he sees something in your life. They're on your heart before they are on your child. Right says, if there's no observance, there's no questions. And so if your kids aren't asking these questions, they're probably not seeing it. Your sanctification has to be in view. And the reality is that parenting is perhaps God's greatest tool of sanctification. It will expose your shortcomings. It will lead you to the edges of your desperation. You will think things that you did not know that you could think about someone you love so dearly. And then you will have so much guilt and shame about that. It's like it will put you to the end of yourself. And so if you have your sanctification in view, you can realize this is way more about me than it is about them. So the reality is you can't give what you don't have when it comes to spiritual legacy. You cannot hand down what you do not have. This is true of all legacies. And so Thomas, he says, if we're willing to consider that God designed parenting more for our own sanctification and transformation, more than to shape our children's lives, we open ourselves up to movement, growth, and maturity. And so he says you have to become a student of your own maturity or lack thereof. I encourage you, families, to map your strengths. Tyson, he calls this an asset map. And basically, it's like whatever your journey is with your kids, just draw a list of an inventory of all the strengths that you bring to bear. And you will find that you have far more strengths within your community than you realized you have alone. He says, what tools, experiences, people, places, trips can you put together in order to develop something extraordinary for them? He says, when I started creating an asset map, I realized I had way more resources at my disposal for my son's journey than I had imagined. And so much more than what I could have offered him on my own. I thought I had to come up with everything. I thought I had to do everything. I thought I had to pay for everything. But I'd forgotten I was surrounded by people who loved me and loved my son, and they were cheering us on way more than happy to get involved. Your grandparents, your aunts and uncles, your church family, your small group. There's people who want to see you invest in your kids. And if you could build a pathway and make some intentional invitations, your resources could triple, quadruple, as you're trying to figure out what you could do in this journey with your kids. Name your strengths, both internally and within your community, and then name your struggles. Name your struggles because it's easier to tend to our anxieties than our priorities. You will parent out of the loudest feeling internally rather than the highest priority externally. You will be thinking, but what will they think? What is mom going to think about that? What is dad going to think about that? Will my church think I'm weird? What will the people around me look at? Maybe I'll feel like a failure. What if? It's like whatever your pressures are, whatever your patterns are, you will parent out of those if you cannot name them. And sometimes even if you can. But it helps so much. Name them to tame them. It's easier to tend to our anxieties than our priorities, but the more that you can shift that power dynamic, you can quiet the struggles and the patterns and the pressures. All right, I'm going to skip this story. All right, last one. Families, dads, moms, grow your support. Have in mind your sanctification. Get a map of your strengths. Name your struggles, grow your support, And what I mean here is match your level of challenge with your level of support. I've said this phrase to several people recently. I heard this from a guy named Ray Johnston, a pastor, and he says basically endurance is the gap between your level of support and your level of challenge. And if you're having a challenge in your marriage, go get some support. If you're having a challenge with your son, go get some support. If you're having a challenge with finances, if you're having a challenge with anger, if you're having a challenge with grief, if you're having a challenge with health, if you're having a challenge with the house, if you're having a challenge with the job, go match your level of challenge with your level of support. Your ability to endure is the gap between your level of challenge and your level of support. If your level of challenge goes up, what that means is you need to go find some level of support. Go find a friend, a mentor, a coach. Go find a counselor. Go find a shepherd, an elder. Go find somebody who can listen. There are people in your corner. Do not go alone. This journey of parenting feels so solitary and lonely at times, but it does not have to be. Invite other people into those struggles and into the strengths so that you can raise your level of support for the very difficult challenge of raising your kids. All right, let me just close with this. Can you just do what you can, not what you can't? I've tried to scatter a lot of seeds today, and the question for you today is really like, what is my next step? It's not all of it. What is my next step? If you're 18 years old and you're listening to this and it's like, your next step is going to be different than if you're expecting your first child, who is going to be different than if you've got the 12-year-old like me stepping into adolescence. It's going to be different than if you've got an empty nester. If you're going to be different if you have adult children who are having your grandchildren. It's going to be different if you're parenting at any of those stages. What is your next step? And when it comes to intentional parenting, that's basically what all intentional parenting is. It's choosing the next right thing. And here's what I want you to know. You can do this. You can do this. You can be an intentional father. You can be an intentional mother. And that's not just because of the resources that you have available to you. It's because the Lord our God has brought us out of bondage, and He led us through the wilderness, and He led us into a place, and He wants you to prosper. The Lord our God is saying, like, I want you to pass this down to your children, to their children after you, so that they can have a good life in the land with you. You don't go alone. You're not alone. Your good Father is with you in this task. He is equipping. He is filling. He is your... If parenting takes you to the end and to the desperation, there you will find God with open arms. We need Him. And with Him, all things are possible. So, do what you can, not what you can't. What is your next step? And then just imagine, what if you did that? Can you imagine kind of that feeling of pride as like, I'm actually taking a step this week. There's a shift in my life. In 2025, I was a father or mother who was letting default dictate my life, but now I'm stepping in intentional. Can you imagine what it might do with your relationship with your spouse to step in, to take some responsibility, some agency? What might it do with your emotional connection with your kids? And then this picture, like the day your child leaves home, and what might that picture look, how could it look different because of your next right step? Let me pray. Lord, would you fill our hearts and our minds with the next right thing? If shame or overwhelm or burden is being experienced right now, Holy Spirit, blow that away. And would you settle the seed that you're wanting to tend to right now? We know the law of the harvest. And your word says that if we sow to the Spirit, we will reap a harvest of righteousness. So that's our prayer. God, would you plant these seeds in our hearts for the next right thing? Would you grow us as intentional fathers and mothers? Would you grow us as an intentional family of discipleship? And would you form our kids for lifelong faith? We give them to you. We need you, O Lord our God. You are the Father of our kids. You are the good Father. You are the Father who comes running. You are the Father who receives. You are the Father of every generation in this building. And so God, come and help us for your kingdom and for your glory. Amen. God bless you.